Hi everybody, I've got a small collection of ironwork. It's basically bits and pieces I find quite interesting, just to see how they're put together. So I'm going to explain how a few of them were made. Now, what I've got here today, apart from a cat, is an animal trap, which would have been used by poachers and gamekeepers. Very simple construction. It's got a paddle on it that just flips about and a pressure plate, and basically if you depress the spring on it, that allows you to open the jaws, flip the paddle down. If you raise up the pressure plate a little, that allows it to catch the paddle, and if you slowly release the spring, that should wedge in place. I say should, it's very sensitive, which is why I'm being quite careful with the fingers, so I can get it to stay. I've got a cat to test it on in a minute. No, that should go. Anyway, these are quite cruel things. You would go to prison if you were caught using one in this day and age, but back in Victorian time it was acceptable. Basically something would walk on this, hit the pressure plate and get caught, and they'd be tethered to the ground via this chain. I actually managed to pick up two of them this morning from a car boot sale for a tenner. There's quite a few about, they're not exactly rare, but I got these two because I'm quite interested in the blacksmithing techniques that were used in making them. They were made by blacksmiths. The one that sat on the anvil over there is probably older than this one, but this one's in the better state of the two, so I'm going to talk about this one mostly. Basically the thing is constructed on one main rail, which is this section here. That's like the chassis, if you like, and it's got a few punched holes. First one obviously is for the chain that will tether it to the ground. Now these holes are punched. I've had a close look at them. I don't know if you can see very well from here. The camera's not very good at focusing. They're not drilled, they are punched. And basically everything else is riveted to this main frame, which is kicked up at the front here to take the jaw. So we start at the front. You could say it is bent over and double punched in order to accept the jaw. Both jaws are independent of one another. We look at the back fixing for the jaw. There's a little toggle that's been made to fit the width of the chassis, and then the main bar has been punched to accept this toggle. It's probably been square punched, I'd have thought, so save the toggle from swivelling around, because it does need to be relatively straight in order to take the jaws. In the middle here we have a little bit of metal that just flicks up the same, which has been punched on the end, and that just takes the paddle, which will act as a sear to hold the pressure plate. Now this again is punched, but in two places this time, to take a pair of toggles which themselves are punched through and riveted in order to hold the hinge for the pressure plate, and the pressure plate is riveted onto the hinge. It sounds complicated, but it's actually amazingly simple. Jaws themselves have been swaged, which is quite interesting, because it shows that there was specific tooling for this particular trap, whereas the other one, which is over there sat on the anvil, has literally been made as a one-off, I believe, although it's exactly the same layout, just smaller, but we'll have a look at that one in a second. the most interesting part of this trap is probably the spring. Now if you look down here, it's riveted, and it was probably stuck over a bick or some kind of hardy tool like that where my finger is, and then just riveted down. That's probably square, but for no other reason than the square punch was handy when they punched the hole. But the most interesting thing about it is that it's actually scarf welded up here. So this bottom part of the spring is going to be the spring steel itself, and that has been scarfed onto a piece of wrought iron, which has been punched and shaped to act as, well, to put the pressure on the jaw. And it's been kind of bent down for efficiency. If it was square, it probably wouldn't sit quite so nicely. There's some lovely little hammer marks down here where it's just been shaped to keep it clear of the pressure plate. It was quite interesting to see, and that was one of the reasons I'd bought it, was because this scarf weld was so visible. It's literally a one heat weld. They've not gone in to clean it up or anything. It's entirely functional and not at all aesthetic, and I quite like that. The object's got a nice honesty about it, because it's not meant to be anything other than a functional object, which is what blacksmithing was all about back in the day, because it's how most things were made, even during the Industrial Revolution. The chain's quite interesting. I'm assuming it's so that a gamekeeper can lengthen or shorten it, where it's just made out of quite chunky wire, which has been rolled over. It's got a swivel on it here, which is quite sweet. If you look at the other trap, which is sat over here, it's a lot smaller. It's a lot more artisanal, and I think this is literally made by a village blacksmith, possibly for a poacher, possibly for a gardener with too many rabbits in his garden. Not in a brilliant state, it's quite corroded. I think he only gave it me to get me to buy the other one at the car boot sale. But I actually quite like this one quite a lot, because it's not been swaged at all. These are forged jaws. Some little file marks on the toggle. No weld at all on the on the spring, which suggests to me that it's wrought iron, which is probably why it's lost so much of its spring. But the most interesting part of this one is the chain, because that is hand forged chain. It's not electrically welded or even gas welded, and if you look at the links, I don't think you can see it on this camera because it's not very good at focusing, but you can see the weld at the top here, which is the way it would have been done with handmade chain. Now, with chain this size, chain making was divided between men and women. There were workshops full of women up until the 1970s, whereby women were unionised to make chain of a specific size and not above, and men were unionised to make chain of a specific size and nothing below. So this would have been made by one or several women, and if you Google it or YouTube it, you'll see videos and pictures of these workshops with women just chain making by a forge with a baby strapped to their back. It's quite amazing. This was up until the 1970s. Here again you can see pair of punched holes to receive the jaw. Obviously the jaws are moving independently from one another. Well, it's just a very nice piece. It's been beautifully punched and beautifully set down, so this is quite a nice piece. It's obviously been tidied up quite nicely, so it was made by someone who knew what he was doing. Don't let its current rusty state fool you. It's a very nice piece. Here again, this is riveted, though if you compare it to the other one, it's a slightly different layout, which is possibly why the smaller one has lost its springiness. But altogether, they're both very nice objects. Thank you for watching.